So this slide is familiar from last night. It kind of goes through different types of psychedelics. We have our phenethylamines, tryptamines, and then other types of psychedelics. So your phenethylamines, these are things like the synthetic would be MDMA. This is methylene methamphetamine or mescaline. MDMA is a synthetic substance. Mescaline is a naturally occurring psychedelic found in peyote as well as several different types of cacti in South America, or cactus. So San Pedro or Huachuma. Trichoceros pachinoi is the genus kind of species name for it. And really, phenethylamines release serotonin. There are other types of phenethylamines out there, things like amphetamine. Amphetamine mostly releases dopamine and norepinephrine. So you can think of MDMA as a serotonin-based amphetamine in that it preferentially releases serotonin, whereas a regular D-amphetamine or methamphetamine preferentially releases dopamine or norepinephrine. You have the tryptamines. These bind directly to serotonin receptors. Your kind of classic synthetic here was brought to us by a man named Albert Hofmann, lysergic acid diethylamide, or acid. Psilocybin, which is found in several different species of mushrooms all over the world, and DMT or dimethyltryptamine, found in many different types of plants, famously things like chalapanga, or as well as chacruna. These are plants that are traditionally used to brew ayahuasca. Also in things like phalaris grasses are fairly high in DMT. Bark of acacia trees, fairly high in DMT, but actually a lot of things have DMT in it, and actually DMT is produced endogenously or produced naturally inside your own brain. Does this mean that smoking DMT is a natural thing? I'm not really sure, because your body, my body at least, produces some testosterone, but obviously injecting myself with testosterone is very different than something that's kind of naturally occurring. So even though you kind of have this divide between synthetic and natural types of things, when you tend to concentrate substances and then use them by different routes of administration, I would argue that doesn't necessarily mimic what naturally occurs inside your body. There's a lot of mystery around DMT and what its kind of role is. There's some people that kind of think it mediates transitions between life and death, and they have some extremely interesting types of experiments where they stress mice by giving them a heart attack, and then they can actually see that there's large amounts of DMT released in this kind of heart attack state. And so there's many people that report near-death experiences, like I almost died, and they see a tunnel, and they're going towards the light, and typically when people smoke DMT, there's kind of this portal or tunnel that opens up that they go through into some other type of universe. So it seems like there's this kind of parallel between near-death experiences and release of DMT, at least in mice, and the DMT experience that is described by human beings when they use it. Some other things here are like 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine. This is also found in several types of plants, but is most famously found in the Bufo alvarius toad or the Sonoran desert toad. People are milking venom glands of toads to obtain this substance, and it actually can be produced synthetically as well. So in the early 2000s, there was a lot of 5-MeO-DMT that was being synthetically produced out of China. In the United States, they made this an illegal substance in 2010, so pretty recently, and since then it seems like the synthetic supply has really dried up, and there's a lot of conversation now about sustainable harvesting of 5-MeO-DMT from toad populations. Some other psychedelics are things like ibogaine and ketamine, and I will talk about these ones a little more today than I did yesterday. They tend to modulate opioid and glutamate systems. And perhaps like one that's not on here that maybe speaks to your question is cannabis, because tetrahydrocannabinol or THC in cannabis actually stimulates the serotonin 2A receptor. Similar to some of these other psychedelics, it tends to be a little bit more mild as a psychedelic, and it tends to give you a little bit more agency. What I mean by that is that you can be very, very high meditating with cannabis, but if the phone rings, you can kind of snap out of it and answer the phone typically. Where if you try to do that with psilocybin mushrooms or LSD, it's very difficult to just kind of snap out of it and go and do something kind of functional. So they're using cannabis in ceremonies very, very similarly to the way that you would set up a psilocybin ceremony with I don't know about blindfolds, but suggested to be eyes closed or going inwards, listening to different types of music, opening with some type of blessing. So putting that sacred container around cannabis use, and that's actually kind of an interesting thing, because I think cannabis is oftentimes used very casually. It's thought of as a social type of drug, and again, kind of accessing the psychedelic part of cannabis by holding it in that kind of same type of set and setting space that we do with other types of psychedelics. So despite these two types of serotonin psychedelics having different mechanisms, either releasing serotonin or binding serotonin receptors, both of them tend to stimulate serotonin 2A receptors. And this is the specific serotonin receptor that we know is responsible for most of the effects that are associated with psychedelics. Because if you block this receptor with a drug and or use some type of gene, they call it like a knockout experiment where they can basically turn off a gene in a mouse, then you will not get the same types of typical responses that you do, at least in rodents, when you give them psychedelics. So this was the slide that I thought I had last night, but I didn't, and it kind of talks a little bit more about the mechanisms of these drugs. So in your brain, you have all sorts of neurons, but this is a serotonin neuron, and really, what do neurons do? They talk to each other, and they talk to each other by converting an electrical signal to a chemical signal, and then it usually goes back to some type of electrical signal. So there's an electrical signal that comes down here and stimulates serotonin release. So this little, what they call a vesicle here, is a packaged serotonin, a little parcel of serotonin, and it will get released into the what we call the synapse, or the synaptic cleft, which means the space between two different neurons. So once serotonin is released, it binds to this what we call a postsynaptic serotonin receptor. So this would be where the serotonin 2A receptor typically is. So things like MDMA typically dump serotonin into the synapse. You have much more serotonin there, so you get more postsynaptic receptor stimulation. Whereas things like tryptamines bind directly to the receptor. And when we talk a little bit more later today, this has like really important types of ramifications when we think about toxicities and drug interactions, because the way that serotonin is basically either degraded or removed from this space is one of two ways. One is degraded by an enzyme called monoamine oxidase. And this enzyme is inhibited by the ayahuasca vine. So ayahuasca is kind of notorious for having much more of a drug interaction potential than some of the other psychedelics. The other one is the serotonin reuptake pump. And this is the target of all of your standard pharmaceutical antidepressants, like the SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. And really, if you kind of think about it, you have psilocybin binding here. Psilocybin is not serotonin, so it does not need to be degraded from this, and it does not need to get removed from the synapse from this. So psilocybin has much less of a drug interaction potential with things like monoamine oxidase inhibitors or antidepressants than a drug like MDMA does, which actually dumps serotonin into the synapse. Because when we think about serotonin toxicities or serotonin syndromes, they're directly related to the amount of serotonin in the synapse. So psilocybin, LSD do not increase the amount of serotonin in the synapse, so it's very, very difficult / impossible, because I've never seen a credible case report of serotonin syndrome with mushrooms or psilocybin ever, yet it's kind of widely reported out there that if you're taking an antidepressant and you take psilocybin mushrooms, then you're going to get serotonin syndrome, which is just completely false from what I've found. Okay. So let's kind of dig a little deeper into the structures of these things. So phenethylamines, this is your kind of phenethylamine skeleton here. You have neurotransmitters, so chemicals in your brain that look like this. This is dopamine. You can kind of see the phenethylamine skeleton. And then you have stimulant amphetamine types of drugs like methamphetamine. These are your psychedelic types of phenethylamines. So you kind of see that what they all have in common is that they have these kind of substituted rings with oxygen, or in the case of MDMA a methylene dioxy ring. So dioxy, 1, 2 oxygens in the extra ring. So it literally is methamphetamine with this extra ring attached to it. And it seems that that extra ring tends to cause, again, a preferential release of serotonin compared to amphetamine, which is more of a dopamine and norepinephrine type of drug. These are your tryptamine psychedelics, and you have serotonin over here. This is your naturally occurring neurotransmitter or brain chemical. And it's included over here as kind of a reference so that you can kind of see the similarities between serotonin and all of the tryptamine-based psychedelics. So serotonin is sometimes, and I have it referred to many times in these presentation decks as 5-HT. This means 5-hydroxytryptamine. So this is a chemical word that literally just means serotonin. This is another kind of term that you may hear if you're kind of reading is indole alkylamine. So this is an indole alkylamine ring. These are all just same terms for the same thing. So 5-hydroxytryptamine, serotonin, and then this ring structure within it is an indole alkylamine ring. It's a little more difficult to see in LSD maybe, but you have your indole alkylamine here, and then you have 1, 2 carbons in your nitrogen. So over here, you see the ring, and then 1, 2 carbons, and then the nitrogen. So you really do have that same indole alkylamine structure embedded within LSD. But compared to the others, it's kind of interesting. These things are not kind of fixed. Like in real life, this it's not just kind of this arm that's fixed. It's actually kind of just floating out here in space all the time and rotating in different types of directions. Whereas these ring structures in LSD really do kind of create this fixed type of structure to it. So you can kind of think of it as a rigidified type of tryptamine. And this probably has implications as to why LSD is dosed in micrograms. It's extremely potent because it's just kind of held in the correct conformation or structure to fit directly into a serotonin receptor, whereas these ones kind of luck of the draw, the arm has to be circling in the right type of direction to sort of fit in there. Hopefully that made some sense.
Is it like a molecular structure kind of?
Right. Yeah. So these are so these are not fixed in space; they're rotating. Whereas this is fixed in space because of the ring structure. So it's kind of reductionist or overly simplified to say that psychedelics just work by stimulating serotonin 2A receptors. They have all sorts of other mechanisms that are maybe specific to different types of psychedelics or things that we're just trying to discover and learn more about. So for example, we know that MDMA has neurohormonal types of effects in that it releases a hormone or a neuropeptide called oxytocin. And this is a love and bonding hormone. This is the same type of hormone that is secreted between mother and baby when they're bonding. It's also, they have these studies that if you look directly into your dog's eyes for 10 seconds, then you get just a little juice of oxytocin, and this is maybe why you feel, so bonded to your pets or your partner. You can look in someone else's eyes lovingly and actually create this type of thing. And MDMA tends to be thought of as an empathogen or an enactogen. Where there's this enhanced sense of connection with other people, and it really is sort of unclear, what part of that comes from serotonin release and what part of that comes from oxytocin release, or this kind of bonding effect. And if you kind of think about the way that they're using MDMA is to, you have to have a lot of trust for your therapist, and there's a lot of interest in using MDMA as a couples therapy type of agent. So this kind of neurohormonal profile or oxytocin release could be important for that. LSD tends to have not only serotonin but dopamine types of stimulating effects, and this may have some ramifications. There's a very rare effect of psychedelics. Actually, they call it hallucinogen persisting perceptual disorder, where the kind of visual effects of LSD don't necessarily wear off completely, and the person is kind of left with some maybe residual tracers or disruptions to their vision, and maybe that has to do with dopamine related effects. it's kind of messy in that although MDMA releases serotonin, it can also weakly bind to serotonin receptors, and it can also very weakly inhibit monoamine oxidase. So these drugs are not necessarily just cut and dry, it's only serotonin 2A receptors. So the kind of bottom line here is that we have a lot to learn about different psychedelics and their different mechanisms of action. So let's talk just a little bit more about serotonin, because it seems that we're talking about serotonin-based psychedelics, so let's talk about serotonin as kind of a foundation for that. I've mentioned that it's an indole alkylamine. It has this kind of ancient and mysterious role and function. It seems like it's involved in all sorts of things in the body, yet we don't necessarily have a clear understanding of what its kind of central purpose is, or if it has a central purpose, or whether it's all of these type of diversified roles. But it does seem that serotonin is incredibly important, because it's sort of found in all the way from bacteria to fungi, and nature is pretty smart. If something doesn't work, if it's unnecessary, it usually evolves out of it and gets rid of it. So when you see something that is evolutionarily conserved or repeated over and over and over again, it's usually because nature's found something that works really, really well for that type of purpose. And you kind of think about psychedelics as serotonin analogs, or drugs that look like serotonin. Why does the fungus produce psilocybin? Is it just to create a spiritual experience in human beings? Or is there some other function as far as warding off predators, or goodness knows, maybe it's a neurotransmitter in fungi as well, right? So there's kind of maybe these drugs that look just like serotonin that are produced in the natural world have similar functions in those types of organisms. Serotonin is synthesized in your body from an amino acid named tryptophan. So tryptophan, tryptamine, 5-hydroxytryptamine, which is serotonin. So it's really only a couple chemical steps away from serotonin, this amino acid tryptophan. And we just had Thanksgiving yesterday in the United States. They talk a lot about tryptophan and turkeys and how it makes you sleepy and things like that. And it's actually probably just because you ate way too much rather than tryptophan makes you sleepy.
Thanksgiving?
Yeah, in the United States, yes, it's all about gravy and what the United States is all about, right? Just excess of everything, and then they're kind of like, it has tryptophan, maybe it makes you sleepy, and it's like, well, maybe you ate 3 plates of food with gravy all over it, right? Most serotonin is actually found in your gut, in your gastrointestinal system. And this is sort of the original brain. They call this the enteric nervous system, or the gut brain. There is so much research that's going on right now that's incredibly exciting about kind of gut-brain axes, and if you change the types of bacteria that you live in your gut, then it changes your mental function, how you think and feel. So I'm incredibly excited to kind of see where this kind of evolves as far as what is the role of the psychedelics on your gut brain and your enteric nervous system? Because this was the original brain. If you think about a worm has an enteric nervous system. It does not have a central nervous system or a brain. So again, kind of thinking of this evolutionary perspective, the gut came first, and this is the original brain. There's a lot of different types of serotonin receptors, but again, the serotonin 2A receptor is the one that tends to mediate psychedelic experiences. So this is just a laundry list, or a long list of different types of things that serotonin can do. And it kind of seems that, wow, all of these things, sleep, cognition, pain, mood, appetite, things like anorexia, sexual behavior, a lot of antidepressants cause sexual dysfunction, probably by interfering with these types of mechanisms. So such a diversified role of serotonin in so many processes throughout the body kind of gives you an idea of, this is potentially why a psychedelic is such a holistic type of drug, is kind of resetting a person and putting a person back to baseline. Because yes, in depression, sleep is often off, cognition, people aren't thinking right. Chronic pain conditions, things like fibromyalgia, they think has a very psychosomatic type of origin to it. So it really kind of, I think when I look at this kind of strengthens the rationale for thinking of psychedelics as affecting more than just the way your brain functions for a couple hours.
Question?
Yeah.
Is there like a synthetically created serotonin that you can take as a supplement?
So the kind of synthetic ones they don't really have a synthetic serotonin. They have L-tryptophan, so you can just buy the amino acid precursor. You can buy 5-HTP, which is 5-hydroxytryptamine. Sometimes that's synthetically produced, sometimes that's extracted from different types of seeds that have that in there. And that's how they kind of came up with this theory of, I don't know if you've heard of this, is that depression is a chemical imbalance. You're low on serotonin, and that's why you're depressed. Because what they did is they found that they could give these diets to people, and if you give someone a diet that has no tryptophan in it for about 3 or 4 days, they become depressed. And then when you reintroduce tryptophan into their diet, their mood restores. So from this kind of experiment, they found that, maybe depression is a chemical imbalance of serotonin. And the kind of incomplete part here is that really only restores your mood if your tryptophan is low. And most people with regular diets get plenty of tryptophan in it. So I meet a lot of people that are kind of like, I'm taking L-tryptophan and 5-HTP for my depression. And I'm kind of like, you eat regular food, right? And they're like, yeah. And it's kind of like, well, that's probably not really going to do very much for you, because it really tends to only have a beneficial effect when you're low on serotonin. So this kind of creates maybe a use case scenario, or like, when would you be low on serotonin? Well, maybe after you took MDMA. You just dumped a bunch of serotonin into your synapse, right? So the body has to make more of it. So maybe for a few days after an MDMA experience, 5-HTP could be really useful as far as kind of restoring the mood back to baseline, because there is this kind of, you have this large emotional releasing effect. People will get better as far as their PTSD, but there is this kind of reported effect of ecstasy blues or e-tardation as far as you're thinking slow, you're a little bit low afterwards. And some of this is maybe due to the drug, and some of this is due to set and setting. Certainly if you take a large dose of MDMA and stay up all night, yeah, that's going to mess with your body a lot more than if you take a moderate dose and you take it at 10 a.m., you're down by 4 p.m. and you go to bed and have a regular night's sleep, right? So the more that you just kind of throw your body off with this thing, probably the harsher the after effects are going to be. And although this is a very kind of compelling sort of use scenario for me, there's never been an experiment that's demonstrated that 5-HTP is necessary after MDMA. All the MDMA clinical studies do not use 5-HTP afterwards, and people do just fine in that week afterwards and continue to heal.
What foods are rich in tryptophan?
Turkey. That's really the only one I know off the top of my head. But the one that they extracted for, I forget the name. I think it's griffinola seed or griffins. It starts with a griff as far as like the seed that they normally extract it from. So if you're looking for a plant-based source of 5-HTP, then bananas, yeah. Many foods do. It's not exactly something that's hard to find in your diet. So I had this slide up yesterday, and really all of these things, gene expression, the mystical experience, neuroplasticity, and the default mode network can be kind of traced back to the serotonin 2A receptor. This receptor is very widely expressed in the body, so it's not just in your brain, it's not just in neural tissue, it's actually in all sorts of tissues. So endothelial tissue is the tissue that lines your blood vessels, and again, serotonin syndrome, often hallmark is extremely high or fluctuating types of blood pressures. Endocrine or hormonal type of tissue, immune or immune system related types of tissues, and there's all sorts of experiments, not all sorts, but a couple labs that are doing experiments with very low or sub-perceptual doses, what you might call a microdose of psychedelics, and kind of finding that they have really potent anti-inflammatory effects, kind of like prednisone or a corticosteroid as far as the potency, which is really incredible because corticosteroids have a host of really horrible types of side effects for people. And then Also things like anti-inflammatory, as far as they think of heart disease or atherosclerosis and narrowing of the vein as an inflammation of the insides of your blood vessel. So this anti-inflammatory effect, could potentially in the future be used as microdosing for prevention of heart attacks and things like that, which would just be really wild and incredible. I've kind of talked just slightly about this as far as when you get excess amounts of serotonin in the synapse, you can end up with serotonin syndrome. And when we get to the specific substances, I'll kind of point out which ones are the highest risk for that. And then when we talk about pharmaceuticals later in the day, we'll also kind of point out which pharmaceuticals with which psychedelics are high risk for that and which ones are low to no risk of that.
Can you explain what it is, serotonin syndrome?
Serotonin syndrome? So serotonin syndrome is a life-threatening type of toxicity that is characterized by very, very high fevers. So usually a fever of, well, in Fahrenheit it's 103, 104. I'm thinking that's about 40 centigrade. So it's very, very, very high as far as the fever goes. What they call autonomic instability, so very, very high, very, very low blood pressures, fast heart rates, things like that. Mental status changes, so the person typically gets very, very agitated. And kind of the hallmark of serotonin syndrome is myoclonus, so kind of seizure-like activity. And all of this combined can put you in really hot water, life-threatening, and a true serotonin syndrome, you end up in the hospital in an intensive care unit, usually with a breathing tube down your throat to kind of help you survive. There are all sorts of other types of serotonin toxicities between that. So I kind of draw the line at serotonin syndrome to me means that's life-threatening. Whereas if you just start Prozac, an antidepressant, oftentimes in the first week you have some mild stomach upset, some difficulty sleeping. This is probably a very, very mild type of serotonin toxicity. Taking MDMA, you have this big release of serotonin, you get dilated pupils, oftentimes you're a little bit sweaty. Many psychedelics kind of cause some level of nauseousness. So this is probably, okay, it's therapeutic, but someone could also look at that and say like, okay, those effects, the sweating, the dilated pupils, that's not necessarily related to your emotional healing, and that would be considered in scientific terms a kind of a side effect or a milder type of serotonin toxicity. So it kind of comes in this gradient, but to me serotonin syndrome is life-threatening, fevers, high blood pressures, breathing tubes, seizures.
Will we talk about it more later?
Pardon?
We will talk later more about serotonin.
I'll talk about the drug combinations that specifically are very dangerous that could lead to that. Yeah. So psychoplastogens, it seems like psychedelics promote neuroplasticity, so they increase connections between different neurons. Put somebody in what we think of as a neuroplastic type of state, so you're kind of moldable, you're kind of impressionable, and certainly this fits with what we know about psychedelics subjectively. People feel very emotionally open, very vulnerable, very suggestible. If you suggest something, it kind of sounds like a good idea when, if you weren't on a psychedelic, you might be like, nah, that doesn't sound like I want to do that right now. But in a psychedelic state, it's kind of hard to have the mental faculty about you to say like, let me think about that. No, I don't really want to do that, right? So this is both probably very beneficial from a therapeutic perspective because hey, you're trying to mold somebody out of trauma, out of depression, out of anxiety, but it also kind of increases the risk to the user in some ways because you could potentially exploit or manipulate somebody in a psychedelic state. So this is kind of why they have all of these different types of safeguards around psychedelics in clinical trials, the two therapists typically in the room with a person, because it kind of limits the ability for manipulation or exploitation and ethics around psychedelics, like what are you doing? Okay, you treat someone with a psychedelic, they come down and then you're kind of like, hey, why don't you leave me a really positive review right now? Right? It's like maybe you want to just like give that person a week or two and say, hey, if you enjoyed yourself, you can leave a review then, right? Instead of kind of suggesting that they do something in the experience or immediately after the experience. So, passive versus active coping. This is a brain model from the Imperial College of London. This researcher named Robin Carhart-Harris is putting this out there. And basically, he's kind of simplified it down to two different receptors. The serotonin 1A receptor and the serotonin 2A receptor. Seems like serotonin 1A receptors are mostly how standard antidepressants work. And it seems that they work by increasing our tolerance to difficult emotion or coping with stressful situations, but they don't necessarily inspire us to change our situation or change our circumstances. And certainly when you meet people that are taking antidepressants, if they're getting a good effect out of it, they describe, yeah, you know, the things that used to kind of really irritate and annoy me don't necessarily irritate and annoy me anymore. So yeah, sounds like that person had an enhanced or increased tolerance to stress. The other half of the people say, I felt like a zombie. I felt like I had no emotion anymore. I felt like very, very blunted, right? So again, you can kind of think that like, oh, well, if you're just kind of passively coping, you know, essentially it's helping you tolerate an intolerable situation, and you know that may not necessarily be the best if you're kind of thinking about your life as a spiritual path where you're trying to evolve, move past things, grow. They might kind of keep you stuck in a certain place. Whereas a psychedelic that works on serotonin 2A receptors tends to do things like increase the amount of entropy in your brain or kind of chaos in your brain, at least when you take it. These has effects as far as cracking open the mind, decreasing rigid thinking, pessimistic thoughts, which is very, very characteristic of a depressed person, as the glass is always half empty, it's never half full. You know, they really only see the negative things in their life and have a lot of difficulty seeing the positive things. And it seems that psychedelics through neuroplasticity kind of increase your adaptability or your ability to change your circumstance. So again, kind of tackling the problem and moving past it. And certainly the kind of end game or the hope out of psychedelic therapy is that you kind of go to the root of the issue and resolve it in a way that the person doesn't have that continue to recur for them, or at least if it is recurring, it's much more manageable. They're able to see it, they're able to cope with it in a much more effective way. Is it 5 minutes? Okay. So the default mode network, it's a group of connected brain regions. It's active when the brain is at rest. So when you're not focusing on something, which is the kind of default state of the brain. It's neuroscience's version of the ego, because we think that that has to do with self-referential activity. So right now I'm standing on the stage thinking that I'm Ben and this is the audience, but from the perspective of physics, it seems like we're all connected in space and time, and there is not this real separation between us. So there must be something about my brain or my body, my being, that is telling me that I'm separate. And we think that this has to do with the default mode network. And dysfunction in the default mode network, or kind of different areas of this circuit in your brain talking to each other, seems to go wrong in all sorts of mental health disorders. When you take a psychedelic, it changes the activity of the default mode network, and acutely when you take it, when you're in the experience, it tends to really shut off or reduce the activity of the default mode network. And we think that this is correlated with things like ego dissolution. So, okay, I don't feel like I'm Ben in this body anymore. I feel like I've kind of left that, the world has opened up, and I'm feeling this increased sense of connectedness or oneness with everything. Seems that that might have to do with changes in the default mode network. It's also kind of associated with this reset or rewiring effect, and for better or worse, I don't necessarily like the analogy of the brain being a computer, but a lot of people are kind of like, I felt like I got reset by the psychedelic. I felt like I rebooted the computer. So just from people's subjective experiences, what they report, it seems like it has this kind of resetting or rewiring type of effect. Taking psychedelics is associated with an increase in mindfulness-related activity, and this is not necessarily in the experience itself. This is afterwards. So people tend to take on a more spiritual practice, more meditation, or just being more present with their lives. Chopping wood, carrying water. Okay, when I'm washing the dishes, I'm just with the dishes. I'm just with the water over my hands, and I'm not necessarily spinning my mind about what I have to do tomorrow, or what happened earlier, things like that. Again, from Carhart-Harris, he's kind of got this, what he calls rebus or relaxed beliefs under psychedelics is what he talks about. And this again kind of goes back to breaking rigid or pessimistic thoughts, what he calls priors. So everything that you kind of perceive in the world is based on a previous model. And when a baby comes out, it has no model, right? So it has to learn that this is what it is. And we have a daughter right now, so she's constantly testing, right? She'd red, red, red. Yes, that's red, right? So she's learning that every time she sees something like that, that red is the correct color for it, right? So that when she's older, she's able to sort of recognize that. So we have these very deeply ingrained types of pattern recognition that go on that kind of construct the world around us. And if the world's been constructed in a way that you're very rigid or pessimistic, it tends to relax those types of belief systems. This is a very kind of complex picture of what I just kind of stated, whereas normally this frontal part of your brain, which is actually where most of the serotonin 2A receptors are in your brain, kind of matches what's coming in from your environment, from the pattern that you know previously, and then determines what that thing that you're looking at or interpreting is, whereas it seems like that is disrupted under the influence of a psychedelic. And actually, people sometimes talk about LSD and they talk about, I got baby eyes. I'm looking at my hand and it's like the first time I've ever seen my hand, right? I'm seeing this kind of level of detail and intricacy on my hand that I've never really seen before. And, it's probably because, this prior pattern or modeling has been disrupted and you're kind of seeing it for what it is instead of what you thought it was. Mystical experiences, so these are being studied in different types of psychedelic trials, but probably the psilocybin trials are the ones that feature this the most heavily. They have 4 different domains to this thing called the Mystical Experience Questionnaire. Sacredness or positive mood, so feeling like your experience is incredibly sacred to you. It wasn't just this euphoric time where you got high. It was kind of like you were in the presence of God. It was very sacred. Unity of all things or oneness. Ineffability, so you cannot describe to somebody else what this was like. This is a really cool word because it essentially describes what's indescribable. So if someone says, how was it? You can just say, ineffable. Says it all. Transcendence of time and space, so feeling like you're outside of yourself, that the way that you're experiencing time in a linear way has just been disrupted. Sometimes you hear this called a religious experience or a profound spiritual type of experience, and it's all referring to this same mystical thing. And I believe like a peak experience might be like another type of synonym for it. So as far as the role in healing now, these mystical experiences have been correlated with all sorts of really positive things. So it tends to mediate the healing effects. The more mystical your experience was, it seems like the better you got in the weeks to months afterwards. Personality changes associated with openness, so openness to new ideas, new perspectives, more imagination. It's correlated with the dose. So the higher the dose, the higher the chance that you'll have a mystical experience. Of course, set and setting is incredibly important in that type of construct. Are associated with persistent and long-term benefits. So, some people have a challenging or difficult experience and really sit there and process it and figure it out and really do get something out of it. But it seems like it's much easier for someone to get a large benefit when they had this kind of mystical type of experience. And it's oftentimes kind of thought that you really have to surrender to have this type of mystical experience or let go of resistance. And they've done some really interesting things that they found that if you're preoccupied, you're thinking about something else when you put that psychedelic in your mouth, the chances are less that you're going to have this type of experience. So again, really approaching it ritualistically, setting an intention, maybe meditating before you take the psychedelic and coming to a place where you're calm and ready to engage with it instead of just sort of like, all right, we got to go, let's pop this pill and head out the door. You're kind of preoccupied and not really with your experience. Music. I don't know, there's so much to learn about the science of music in psychedelic therapies. And in the trials, they're using set playlists. in ayahuasca or kind of shamanistic traditions, the shaman or facilitator usually sings or plays music. However, there are certain people that prefer to just take a psychedelic on the beach in silence or in the woods in silence, and that tends to be healing for them as well. So the role of music, certainly the wrong song can really make it not right, but at the same time, we have a lot to learn about like what tempos at what times in the experience really kind of guide the person in a way that provides a lot of healing. And many people are kind of like music is the hidden therapist in psychedelic experiences. Okay, I think this is one of my last slides here. And basically the point of these last two slides is to show you that although serotonin-based psychedelics and glutamate-based psychedelics like ketamine have very different mechanisms of action, there is some convergence or overlap between serotonin 2A receptors and glutamate. And specifically, they have what they call receptor dimerization, or two receptors that come together, bond together, and then that changes the signal that is happening inside of the cell. So you have serotonin here. You see when serotonin binds, it doesn't have this neat little triangle on it like a psychedelic would. So when serotonin binds, it cannot recruit this glutamate-based receptor. You see the triangle fits in here. Serotonin doesn't have this triangle. So when a psychedelic is bound, you get serotonin receptors bonding to glutamate receptors, and that actually provides a different signal to the inside of the cell than serotonin would or glutamate would in and of itself. So it kind of shows that there is this kind of overlap between serotonin 2A receptors and glutamate. And then this kind of goes one step farther and shows you that in these, what they think in your cortex, they call them layer 5 pyramidal cells of the cortex, your frontal cortex. You have serotonin receptors, you have glutamate receptors on the same thing, and you kind of see that, wow, ketamine and psychedelics can both bind to these types of receptors, and certainly ketamine can be dangerous mixing with other drugs, but certain combinations, ketamine and MDMA in moderate doses is reasonably safe, but wow, does it potentiate the experience. It's incredibly strong when you kind of put these two things together. Okay, so that's all I have for the neuropharmacology section. Do we have any time for a question, or?
I mean, we're tight, but
Yeah, that was kind of very dense the last couple slides. Yeah.
We've talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to know: is there any scientific explanation to situations when you take psychedelic and it just doesn't open up? Like when you take ayahuasca or San Pedro and
Yeah.
nothing.
Scientific explanation. So, I think that there's probably a number of possible reasons for this. One could be mental preoccupation before you took it, right? You're so preoccupied that you're in your experience, but you're kind of resisting it now. You're not able to open up to it.
Physical explanations.
Well, the mind is very strong. The mind is very good at repressing things. And this is essentially kind of you have a traumatic experience. It's not time to sit around and emotionally process it then, because you have to get out of a dangerous situation. So the mind's coping mechanism is to repress, is to push that down, which if you don't go back and process it, then it kind of ends up in trauma. But disassociation is a part of trauma. It's a part of PTSD. And oftentimes people that have heavy amounts of disassociation with their trauma find it very difficult sometimes to open to the experience, because they're so used to being able to go to a dissociated place to repress the things that are coming up that it may not come up. Other reasons might be they're on pharmaceuticals. A lot of pharmaceuticals really blunt or diminish the effects of psychedelics, and I don't really know scientifically why, but it oftentimes seems that it takes once for the body to learn how to respond to something. Oftentimes the first time people smoke cannabis or marijuana, not very much happens. The second time, and it's like, I don't know why that is, but it tends to be, and sometimes people, they drink ayahuasca and they're like, nothing happened my first night. They drink it the second night and everything happens. So I'm not really sure why. Or the opposite, right. So this is, again, I think where science and spirituality sort of overlap in that there is so much mystery to these substances and why people have such varied experiences on different nights and different occasions, even with the same substances, the same doses. But that's a really good question, very interesting. Yes?
I'm curious as to, are there any known benefits to actually lowering the baseline of serotonin levels? Which
That's a good
probably
question.
cause depression or the depressive state, but are there any? I'm not talking about when you have serotonin
Right.
syndrome, but
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, certainly, like you say, if you have excess serotonin that's causing all sorts of side effects or problems, then yeah, of course, lowering it's going to be better. But
like
just having a low
normal,
baseline level, I'm not aware of a benefit of that.
and are there any substances or drugs that would lower it?
Yeah, there are. So, I mean, MDMA dumps serotonin, but then you're low on it. There's other drugs like the one, it's a very old drug, it's not used anymore, it's called reserpine, and it was essentially taken off the market because it was making people depressed, very anxious, because it slowly depleted serotonin. It wasn't something like MDMA that just dumps it. It was more like a little bit day after day, and then, weeks to months later, it's sort of like I'm on the rocks and I'm not really sure why. Yeah.
But if you're like manic, for example,
Yeah.
they're gonna, the mania, they're gonna want to lower you.
True.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
was,
Kind
I
of
was
feel depressed
curious
because you're
for
coming
people
down.
Yeah.
who experience like baseline normal levels of serotonin. Would there ever be any benefits to actually experience
Yeah.
lower?
So probably not for a healthy person, but what she's saying is absolutely
Yeah.
true about
Makes
antipsychotics for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Is a lot of the newer ones block the serotonin 2A receptor, and it seems like the purpose is actually to kind of, antipsychotic, you could also call them anti-psychedelic, because they literally are just the pharmacological
Yeah,
opposite.
dopamine the same, like the L-dopa,
Yeah.
medicine
Yeah.
for Parkinson.
One more?
We're 20 minutes behind.
We're 20 minutes behind. Can I answer it for you over here?
What was the last thing you said about ketamine and MDMA, that it's really working strong together? Or
Yes.
It's,
Synergy. So
between them?
in pharmacology, you have additive effects, 1 + 1 = 2, and you have synergy, 1 + 1 = 5. MDMA and ketamine is like a 1 + 1 = 5. Yeah.
Now, why is it so important to talk about risks and benefits? And I feel like this quote really, just about to summarize everything I'm about to talk about in a very potent way. To fathom hell or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic. And said this Humphrey Osmond, who was the researcher that coined the term psychedelic, right? So psychedelics do have a variance in the range of the experience that they can provide. They can take a person into soaring into really high states, as well as going down into the underworld. And the first thing to understand about the risks and benefits is, first of all, I'm going to go back to, sorry, someone is talking here and I'm, shh. סליחה. קשה לי להתרכז ככה. Yesterday we saw this slide about the life pie, right? And we talked about the different ways that psychedelics can impact every single aspect of our lives. And they really bring awareness to all these different subtleties that we were previously unaware of. And we can get insight into all of these in only just one single psychedelic experience. Ben talked a little bit about entropy, and I want to talk about that a little more. So in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, entropy means chaos or disorganization or randomness. And psychedelics basically dim a regional activity of the brain while activating other regions, has been talked about as well, along with connecting new neural pathways that were previously unconnected. So this causes chaos in the brain. So basically, if you imagine taking a snow globe, Timothy has a snow globe? It's like a little glass that has snow in it, and you gave it a good shake, and then all the snow kind of dumps into the snow globe, and it takes it a while to settle down. So what psychedelics do pretty much is they shake up the brain, create all these new neural pathways, and then it takes a while for the brain chemistry to settle down again. So this is a great opportunity in the psychedelic healing phase to introduce new opportunities, right? But at the same time, it could also cause a destabilization in our being. It can cause typically effects, risks and benefits that are transient. כל מיני אפקטים שבדרך כלל עוברים אחרי יומיים, שבועיים, תלוי כמובן בבן אדם, תלוי בסאבסטנס עצמו, אבל לאנשים ספציפיקלי שיש להם בעיות מנטליות, mental health issues, it can cause a really long-lasting period of deterioration in the mental health. But entropy can be related specifically not just to psychedelics, but really, if we think about it, to every major life event. And we did mention this a little bit last night. Any type of big life event, like having, like childbirth that a woman goes through, where the hormones change, the brain changes as the woman gets ready for labor and having a new child. Grief, death in the family, relocating to a different country. All these things are major life situations that cause us or make us see outside of the box, expand our ways of seeing the world, and they are, by definition, can cause entropy in the brain because nothing is the same, everything becomes chaotic. So this is something that happens because of their vastness, right, of the experience, and because they're so abnormal. Oh, מה עשיתי פה? Sorry. וזה גם קורה peak experiences like psychedelics. So basically what I'm trying to say is that entropy is not a bad thing. Entropy is something that's...
We're not sure what is entropy.
Hmm?
We're not sure what is entropy.
Chaos. I defined it as chaos, yeah. Entropy is a chaos. Again, taking the snow globes, shaking it, ויש הרבה בלגן, ברדק, בקיצור. וזה עוד פעם משהו שקורה בדרך קבע in our human psychology, is in the human experience. It's not a bad thing, and psychedelics can cause that along with other major life events. But here's where it gets a little tricky, right? So again, entropy is even a welcome state that we want. We want the shaken snow globe effect. We want to think outside of the box. However, when there are pre-existing mental health conditions, okay, where the individual is already in a state of chaos, then that's where it becomes more risky. Because the individual doesn't necessarily have the structure in their brain that they can return to as easily, and they could really get lost in there. And you know how some people say, I don't know if I'm ever going to come back, they're fearing that. Well, that is actually a situation that can happen with certain mental health conditions, which we'll talk about in one of the upcoming slides. But before we do that, here's another quote about chaos, which said Terence McKenna, chaos is what we've lost touch with, and this is why it is given a bad name. It is feared by the dominant archetype of our world, which is the ego, which clenches because its existence is defined in terms of control. So basically the whole idea of the ego, the default mode network, is that it resists chaos because in chaos it cannot function. When there is chaos in the brain, when there is a disruption in the normal ways of thinking, then the ego dies. So the ego fears its own death. But in the psychedelic state, we want that ego loss. So we define it also by entropy. Here are some of the side effects that can happen with specifically risks. Okay, we're not going to talking about the benefits yet, but the risks. But these risks are related specifically to all doses, right? From the subperceptual, talking about microdosing, to very heavy or heroic doses. And the side effects, as we can see again, are usually transient, meaning they pass usually within 24 to 48 hours. So that's actually quite normal after a psychedelic experience to experience any single one of these because of the entropy. So we're talking about emotional discomfort that can already start happening. Yes?
I have a question about the last one.
Yes.
Wait, it ran off the top of my head, 1 second. If someone comes, okay, this is the question, sorry. If someone already has a mental issue, the question is, because it's very easy to say that psychedelics make it worse or the psychedelics make it come out from the unconscious. but there is a theory that it would happen years or now or later, even without psychedelics.
Right, exactly.
So this is what I want to ask, because so is it unnatural to bring it out of the psychedelics path, or you understand my question?
No, I'm not. Maybe I'm going to keep talking about this in 2 more slides, and maybe it will become a little
Okay.
clearer. And if it's not, please ask again. Okay?
Thank you.
So these side effects that can happen with any type of psychedelic journey, emotional discomfort that can already typically begin actually before the psychedelic journey, right? The session begins, right? As we prepare for the session, we already might start feeling uncomfortable, a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiety, being nervous, right? Panic attacks, common for some people, being paranoid, delusions, feeling overwhelmed, flashbacks to the psychedelic states, having reactivations, which is actually a side effect that's very common, specifically, most notably with 5-MeO-DMT, the Bufo alvarius toad. People who utilize the 5-MeO-DMT, I think about 20% of them experience reactivations. And this basically what it is, it's where the individual can just be going about their lives. It can be days or weeks or even months after the experience, driving in their car, and suddenly they're taking it into the consciousness state that they experienced while they were under the toad medicine. And this can happen also while they're asleep. And you know, if the individual is not prepared for that, of course, this can be frightening, and the person might resist it. Opinions about the reactivations are kind of split. You know, the professionals that really work with this medicine actually say that it's a good thing because the medicine keeps working and then you can keep interacting with it. But if it lasts for a while, obviously it can get uncomfortable, and some people are nervous that, yes, maybe they do have permanent brain damage, right?
What is the difference between a flashback and a reactivation?
Flashback is going back to the experience momentarily. Reactivation is when you feel your whole body getting into it. Flashback is more mental, emotional. With a reactivation, it's like you're there again.
In the medicine.
In the medicine state. Like you
like
can't.
Deja vu, like daydreaming deja vu.
Yes.
Versus actually like going through it again.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yes. Yeah.
Without that killing.
But again, I think the flashback is more psychological.
Yeah.
The reactivation is more physical. Okay? And of course, derealization and depersonalization, which are 2 psychological mental health, criteria that basically mean that the person detaches from reality. And people who are already suffering specifically from disorganized thinking, mania, and psychosis, which are diagnoses, they're already permanently experiencing entropy in their brain. So what happens if, to add to that constant entropy, you add more entropy? That's when they don't come back. That's when they can remain in that psychotic state, in the psychosis. So it really matters when we talk about when we do the safety assessment a little bit down and further in the slides, we will see that people who are already susceptible to the entropy, then it's really not recommended because the risks with this specific group are way higher than the maybe common folk. But I keep going back. Okay, so contraindicated psychological conditions. So now that we saw the psychological risks, and notice that I only listed the psychological. There are also physical risks as well, which I think Ben is going to talk about if he hasn't talked about yet. But these are only psychological, but there are definitely physical risks and psychological risks. So this is, here we talk about the specific psychological conditions. People who suffer from these conditions are not good candidates for psychedelic therapy. Again, because of the constant state of entropy that they're in. So individuals who have bipolar disorders, that they're already experiencing, they're already polarizing between states of depression and mania, which psychedelics can heighten those feelings of depression and mania. Schizophrenia, which is disorganized thinking and being in a constant psychosis. people who have had recent suicidal ideations, which they're emotionally unstable, borderline personality disorder, where the individual doesn't have a strong sense of self, right? So what happens in the psychedelics? The self gets it's ripped apart, right? So what are they left with? They have nothing to return to, so they can really get lost in there. And healthy people that don't necessarily have these diagnoses, remember how we talked about the current life situations, right? So if they're going through some type of crisis period or a life situation that causes entropy, then it would not be necessarily a good time for them to go into the psychedelic state, because again, it would just amplify their entropy. So if they're going through a divorce, if they're just leaving their job, if they're grieving the death of a loved one, and again, just major life changes, maybe it would be best off to wait until they're feeling more emotionally stable. So this is these are the groups that are at risk and not recommended to partake with psychedelic substances while experiencing any of these. Someone raised their hand over there? Yeah.
I'd like to ask about the borderline personality disorder, because I know, for example, in the MDMA treatment, they treat people with complex PTSD, which include many borderline personality disorder.
Post-traumatic stress disorders.
And there's no, they don't regard it as I understood, as a problem. So, and I actually don't really understood your explanation why it's a problem.
Of what? The borderline?
Borderline personality disorder.
People who have borderline personality disorder, they're in a fantasy world and they lack one of the main criteria or descriptions of people who have that is that they lack a sense of self. They don't have a strong ego structure. So they're more malleable and more susceptible to be getting lost in psychological, emotional experiences. So their brain is already kind of swirling around, if I can use that. Ben?
They also, borderline personality disorder, they also have an incredibly strong fear of abandonment and a very high degree of difficulty forming trustworthy relationships with people. And to go into a very vulnerable, open state with a guy or therapist, you just need that rapport and trust there. So it's just very difficult, almost from a therapist perspective, to get a person with borderline personality disorder with enough rapport and trust to feel comfortable that you can provide something therapeutic for them.
And they also don't necessarily trust themselves, again, because they don't have that ego that gives them a sense of who they are.
And the compatibility to hold a lot of things that are like complexity.
Right.
I mean, most of it they're black and white, dichotomic thinking, in general speaking.
Yes.
So should be something much more complex.
Right.
אתמול דיברו על זה בכנס של הפסיכיאטריה, ש-PTSD ובורדרליין הם די קרובים. הרבה פעמים חבר'ה שיש להם PTSD, לרוב הם על הגבול, לא בהכרח זה. ואולי פה, אני שואל, כן, תוהה, מדובר על יותר הפסיכדלים הקלאסיים, שיותר שולחים למסעות, לעומת MDMA, שהוא קצת, בדיוק, אז נראה לי שממה שהבנתי אתמול רק בכנס, שכן עובדים עם PTSD בורדרליין על הגבול, אבל רק עם MDMA ולא עם החומרים היותר...
I like that explanation.
About that.
בבקשה.
מי שיש לו PTSD הוא מתנהג כמו borderline, which is not the same as if you have a borderline.
הבנתי, זה רק...
למרות שהרבה...
looks like it, okay.
A lot of the borderline personality diagnosed people had severe trauma in their past, so that's usually related anyway.
Well, it's not just words.
Right, and they have more intergenerational trauma because they model their trauma after their primary caregiver, who usually has borderline as well. So they model the lack of sense of self from their primary caregivers. But that is true, right? Because the empathogen, which you don't mention MDMA, I don't feel like it takes you to the same places, the depth of insight that the other classic psychedelics have.
In Hebrew, they also say visut rikshi.
Okay.
That means like when you can actually validate your emotions, and sometimes in these disorders, and that's the problem. It's like kind of like a line where people can't, they're like their reactions to things are like kind of different than someone, and then they can't come back because they're not like, it's like a temperature, like a thermometer.
בדיוק, לבורדרליין זה אנשים בלי גבולות, right? אין להם גבול. וגם פסיכדליקס עוד יותר לוקחים אותך לפורצים את הגבול, אז לאן הם ילכו? Right into the deep end.
כן.
כן. As these are the contraindicated, and then just a word about, like another word about safety, right? So there's this common thought that psychedelics are just not safe, or at least that's what they're trying to teach us. But there was a group of David Nutt, who's a former president of the European College of Neuropharmacy, and he's an advisor, or was an advisor to the British government on the misuse of drugs. הוא ועוד קבוצה של researchers, ואני חושבת שזה היה ב-2012, הם עשו מחקר על on the drugs harms in the UK, and they compared psychedelics to all the different classes of drugs to see, in terms of their addiction, how they affect our lives and so forth. And look at what they found, actually, that the psychedelics actually seem to be the safest out of most of other drugs, and the most dangerous drug actually is one that's completely legal, and it's alcohol.
The graph is totally different in the US, by the way. This is only the UK stuff,
Okay.
but
You've seen it?
חקרתי את זה בקיצור כדי לראות אם זה כלל עולמי, הגרף הזה, ובארצות הברית בכלל במובילים זה כל התרופות מרשם, פרספריקשן, כל נגדי חרדה, סירופ שיעול, הרבה מעל כל האלכוהול.
עוד יותר מזה? כן, יכול להיות באמת שזה לא, אוקיי.
זה הכל סטריט דרגס, אבל הגלובל דרג סרוויי הם הרבה דברים מאוד דומים מבחינת הסמים הפסיכדליים, כאילו הפטריות במקום האחרון שמה, ב-2017.
כן, כן, בנוגע לפטריות כן.
אבל הפחות מסוכנים נשארים קונסיסטנט.
כן. So it's quite amazing when you think about it, and there was an article that also came out this year that stated that mushrooms is the safest compound probably known to man. So just something to think about in terms of. But LSD does have, well, both of them have psychological risks, but at least mushrooms, because they're the plant, they're physically also less risky, I think, than LSD is. Right, Ben?
But you can get poisoning, like a lot of people take mushrooms and they get like a poisoning.
Poisoning from mushrooms?
Like stomach poisoning.
I'm not sure I've heard about that before.
There's different ways of measuring harm here. You're talking about, some of you are talking about toxicity, and some of us are talking about harm, which can include self-inflicted harm by falling off a roof or psychological harm.
Right, and then there's also that, of course, right? So right now we're just talking about pure psychological harm, right? Thank you for that reminder.
הגרף הזה גם מדבר על סכנות, לקחו 8 קטגוריות של מוות בכבישים, אלימות במשפחה, פירוק משפחות, וכאילו המשרום כן מסוכן במקצת, אבל יותר to the user ופחות לעולם החיצון, שונה מאלכוהול.
והוא מסוכן יותר to the user because we don't have the educational systems to explain to people who want to use them how to do it safely. And that's really it. Okay, we talked a little bit about the risks. Now we're going to go to the benefits, okay? Psychological benefits. So the primary benefit is that pretty much that psychedelics just go deeper and faster than any other type of therapy that is available, any other type of talk therapy or other pharmaceutical therapy. So you can gain basically the experience of being years in therapy and cutting through the stories, cutting through any blockages that a person has. It shuts down the rational mind and increases the irrational, the connection to spirit, the connection to the emotions, the connection to the heart. So it allows the heart to speak. It really emphasizes the mind-body connection, helps us get out of our heads and get in sync with our psyche, which is the spirit, and the body. Everything is aligned. Emphasizes being in the moment. Allows us to break through that 5% that we talked about yesterday, right? And merge with the 95% of the unconscious. And I think one of the biggest main benefits is that really psychedelic therapy and psychedelic experiences are really experiential. You really feel a psychedelic insight with every cell of your being, whereas when you sit in talk therapy and you talk, or at least you attempt to talk about a trauma that you might have had in your life, you can't necessarily fully be there because of emotional blockages or pain that is lingering deep within you. Whereas in psychedelic states, you're really able to drop into that moment and really experience maybe the pain, maybe the joy, maybe the bliss, and afterwards you're left with what seems to be like not just an emotional and an energetic, but also a physical imprint of that moment that you've had experience in the psychedelic state, and that is something that you can keep returning to in your integration phase. So again, it's less mind and more heart, more body, more soul. And a lot of people in integration, they're able to really, if they go into meditation, they're able to get into that state and just be reminded of the depth of their insight, and they receive a lot more healing out of that. And really, they just give us an opportunity to investigate every part of our being. Again, it's the mind-body-spirit connection in that whole life pie that we saw in the slides of the energetic, physical, emotional, cognitive, spiritual, home, life professions, life purpose. So allow us to investigate everything about ourselves and upgrade everything in our lives. How are we doing on time, by the way? I feel like I'm kind of behind. Chen? 10:30 כבר? Okay. Okay, more psychological benefits. Trauma resolution. Specifically, I want to talk about that for a minute. Because, again, when we sit in... how many here are therapists, by the way? Therapists, psychologists? Okay, quite a few. Okay. So what is it like when you have a person that comes in with a traumatic event in their life? Just how long do you think, on average, it would take you as a therapist or as a healer to help the person access their traumatic event or memory, and that enables them to feel safety and trust to talk about their experience and to heal from it?
Depends on the person.
6 months.
Of course, depends on the person. 6 months, okay.
Between a year and 3 years.
No, it can be one hit and שתי מפגשים ולפעמים 100. זה תלוי איפה באיזה רמת מוכנות המטופל מגיע.
כן.
And sometimes never.
Sometimes never, exactly, נכון. וזה לא משנה כמה באמת the person can לסמוך בעיניים על עצומות להיות עם התרפיסט הזה decades, ממש ככה, והם עדיין לא יכולים להגיע בגלל שזה כל כך עמוק, it's so repressed in their psyche. One of the biggest benefits is that the psychedelic states enable us to reach the trauma, but not even just ours, right? But the ones that we have inherited from our lineage, from our grandparents, from our ancestors, because trauma is really encoded deeply in our DNA. At least that's what it's hypothesized. And there is a new research going on in the US right now by a doctor named Joe Tafur, who wrote an excellent book called The Fellowship of the River. And he's an American doctor that has an ayahuasca healing retreat center in Peru called Niue Rao. And Niue Rao, Nihure, and then Rau. His name is Dr. Joe Tafur. Tafur. His book is Fellowship of the River. In the book, he talks heavily about the mind-body connection and how basically to his account, every physical disease is rooted in emotional and spiritual disease. And how ayahuasca is able to ממש יכולה לפרק את זה מתוך ה-DNA. And then what can happen is it can modify the gene expression once the person is healed. ממש המבנה הגני שלהם יכול להשתנות. ועכשיו הם מתחילים לעשות על זה ממש מחקר קליני דרך אוניברסיטת USC. אז זה לא פותר את זה רק מוחית, קוגניטיבית, אלא ממש פיזית. מרפא את הטראומה. סורי, רצית להגיד משהו? אני כל הזמן. אז וזה באמת תכונה I think only, I'm not sure if, I'm not personally not aware of other therapies that enable us to do this, and at least not in such a short amount of time that psychedelics enable us to. Yes.
עכשיו נזכרתי שאת מדברת עברית ואני הבנתי איך אני רוצה לשאול אותך את זה.
אוקיי.
האם הדברים היום מתפרצים אצל הבן אדם, גם אם הוא לא היה לוקח חומרים פסיכדליים? זאת אומרת, אם בן אדם מחזיק טראומה, אונס מהילדות, PTSD פה בצבא כאילו הרבה, וכאילו הוא הצליח להדחיק את זה, ואז הוא הולך למסיבה או לסשן, וזה מצטער.
Through peak experiences, I believe so.
לא רק פיק, ואז השאלה נשאלת, כאילו, כי הרבה פעמים קל להגיד, זה ה-MD עשה לו את זה, זה ה-LSD, ואז נשאלת, האם עוד 2-3, לא יודע, הוא היה הולך למקום נורא רועש, ואז שומע בום, האם גם בלי הפסיכדלים היה לו את ההתפרצות הזאת? כי נורא קל תמיד to blame the psychedelics, כאילו
שם, בחלק מהמקרים בטוח כן.
זו שאלה, כי כאילו, ואז אתה אומר כאילו, התפרצה לו הטראומה, ואז אתה מאשים את במרכאות, מאשים את הפסיכדלים, ואז השאלה הנשאלת, האם זה היה קורה לו גם ללא הפסיכדלים, כאילו...
נכון, אתה צודק. אני מסכימה איתך, זה באמת שאלה
לא, אני
מצוינת.
מנסה להבין כאילו...
בפסיכיאטריה קוראים לזה אישיות או מצב פרימורבידי, והסטטיסטיקה היא שבין גילאים 18 ל-25 זה היה מתפרץ anyway, אבל יש כמובן טריגרים. למשל, יש אנשים שבטירונות בצבא, בכל התיכון הם עוברים בסדר, בטירונות יש איזה מצב של סטרס.
בריטריט ויפאסנה, יש לאנשים התפרצויות
פסיכוטיות. יכול אפילו יזיעה בחדשות על איזשהו מצב של התעללות במישהו ופתאום זה פורץ, פתאום זה מעלה שם, זה יזיעה בחדשות.
אין טעם להאשים את הפסיכדל, כאילו,
אז שוב, אני חוזרת לזה שבגלל שאנחנו משתמשים בקטע הפסיכדלי כחוויית שיא. אז למעשה כל חוויית שיא שיכולה באמת לבוא דרך ויפאסנה, יכולה לבוא דרך meditation, can happen with a kundalini awakening, can happen in a trance party with the amazing music that causes a mystical experience, absolutely. Thank you.
It connects very strongly with the idea of deeper and stronger. Basically,
כן, זה פשוט חותך.
deeper, stronger, normal process.
וזה multi-sensory, עוד פעם, זה multi-sensory. אוקיי, בואו נתקדם, אנחנו באמת צריכים לצאת להפסקה. Okay, as more benefits, we've seen that because of the chaoses could be beneficial, and the entropy can be beneficial for people who have obsessive compulsive disorder because of the rigid thinking. So again, the snow globe effect can really benefit these people. People who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, specifically as we talked about with MDMA, that enables the person to view their trauma without the fear factor and with just more of an open heart. Depression and anxiety, and as they're shown currently in clinical trials. So these are only some of the benefits.
Is this common to all psychedelic substances, or?
Well, I think some of them more than others. I mean, for example, drug addiction and substance misuse depends. Like psilocybin mushrooms have been many anecdotal stories and are shown to help people relieve from addiction to cigarettes, right? Addiction to alcohol. And also... סליחה? כן, ואייבוגן, exactly, לאנשים שסובלים מ-opiate addiction, שזה ממש, not just, okay, psilocybin works psychologically, ibogaine or iboga also works physically, הבן אדם שמכור להרואין, שנים פתאום מתעורר ממסע של איבוגה שהוא לא מכור בכלל, without any withdrawal symptoms, שזה לא קיים בשום תרופה ברפואה המערבית. אז תלוי גם בסם ותלוי איך הם עובדים.
גם LSD נחקר בעבר הרבה להתמכרויות.
תחילת הדרך במחקרים מאוד...
אלכוהול.
כן, נכון, אבל יש הרבה anecdotal stories, נכון? אז באמת תלוי חלק עובדים בצורות מסוימות. יש כאלה עוד פעם שיותר משפיעים, למשל depression specifically, יש כמה שעובדים על depression. Ayahuasca is known to help people who are depressed. Also, mushrooms are known specifically for anxiety and depression as well, but it doesn't mean שאחרים גם לא עוזרים למצבים האלה. פשוט אני חושבת שחלק מהם נחקרו ספציפית עבור המצבים האלה, כי these are real life first world problems שאנשים מחפשים עליהם תרופות.
כן, אז השאלה שבאמת הייתה, אם יש כאילו, יש במחקרים העסקניים, איזושהי אינדיקציה שפטריות יותר מתאים לזה.
כן, אז אני אומרת, ספציפית, אתה שואל על פטריות? כן, depression and anxiety, למשל. יש לך...
OCD? OCD גם עובדים בפטריות.
כן, נכון, OCD זה פטריות. Post-traumatic stress disorder זה MDMA, אוקיי?
כן, ראיתי בסרט.
כן, ראיתם את זה? אתה From Shock to Awe?
זה של המחקר הזה.
כן.
של חמלה.
אוקיי.
כן, לכל מצב כזה יש, כמו שאמרת, חומר מותאם.
את החומר המותאם, אבל it doesn't mean that the other ones don't work on them as well.
כן, מחקר עוד בחיתוליו. מחקר עוד בהתחלתי, זה עוד ישתנה.
גם לפני 60 שנה סטן גרוף נגיד דבר חומרים, לפחות 3 או 4 חומרים שונים, והמסקנה היא בסופו של דבר שיש אומנם איכויות מסוימות למדיסינות שונות, אבל הפיק אקספיריאנס או המיסטיקל אקספיריאנס או החוויות הפסיכולוגיות הם החומר גלם.
שמרפא את הכל.
למה? כי כל השאר זה פלסטרים, וזה מנקה את זה ברמה של הנשמה, נקרא לזה. אז אם אנחנו מדברים בסדר, ביולוגיה, אז זה מתאים לזה וזה מתאים לזה. ויש דברים שמעבר לפלסטר שהתחלנו עכשיו.
אני יותר אוהב מפתח.
אז זהו, אז שוב אני רוצה להדגיש שיש באמת את אלה שעובדים יותר פיזית. גם קדמין למשל מראים שזה לא רק החוויה המיסטית, אלא יותר באמת עובד פיזית, אוקיי? על הנוירוקמיסטרי, למשל, עוד דוגמה. אבל שוב תלוי. קדמין for depression.
וסויסיידל גם.
ועכשיו גילו לאלכוהול.
אוקיי, בוא חברים מתקדם, אנחנו מה זה מאחורה. כן.
I just wonder about MDMA and depression and also if MDMA אם MDMA מייצר דיכאון או
מייצר דיכאון? potentially בגלל מה שבן הסביר קודם, איך שזה משנה את הסרוטונין במוח, ויש באמת תופעה כזאת שנקראת באנגלית Blue Mondays או Suicide Tuesdays, אוקיי? אבל כמו שבן אמר, במחקרים עצמם שעושים אותם, לא מראים ולא מדברים בכלל על ה-low mood שמגיע אחר כך. הספקולציה היא, did you want to say something? No. Okay, let me finish. הספקולציה היא שדווקא זה, קודם כל זה מאוד תלוי בכמה פעמים הבן אדם משתמש ב-MDMA, שבדרך כלל אומרים שאנשים שיש להם שימוש רב יותר, או היסטוריה של שימוש ב-MDMA, they're more susceptible to having these low moods. ודבר שני, ב-purity of the drug. ואנשים שהם ב-trials, אין להם שום ניסיון, the drug is usually on a very high quality. אז זה כבר מבטל את התופעות לבעיה האלה.
And it depends if it's your first times or you've been...
That's what I just said.
Ah, okay.
And they get integration and whatever.
Very little integration, and I'm going to talk about that.
Days, but I'm saying the whole integration in the sense that you said the preparation before and during.
נכון, שזה מאוד משנה.
If you wake up the morning after an MDA session and you say, I'm going to have a shit day because I had MDMA yesterday, you're probably going to have a shit day. זאת אומרת, הרבה מהתמיכה עוזרת לזה שזה, it's reframed.
Exactly. The support system that they have in place, they know that someone is there for them. בדיוק. Okay, I'm gonna skip this slide. I feel like this is pretty easy and you guys have it בחומר שלכם. יש לנו פה דברים יותר מעניינים לדבר עליהם. Psychedelic therapy education protocols, okay? אז התחלנו לדבר על זה אתמול. על איך למעשה מה שבן ואני עושים, הקטע של ה-psychedelic education שמאוד חשוב לנו, שהמטרות שלו, של כל הדברים האלה שאנחנו עושים פה, זה risk reduction, benefit enhancement and safety maximization. זאת אומרת, כמה שפחות סכנות, כמה שיותר ריפוי, וכמובן להעלות את רמת הבטיחות, שזה משהו נקרא נר לרגלנו בכל ההכנות האלה שאנחנו עושים פה. וגם אתמול הצגתי לראשונה את my model for psychedelic education, which is set and setting, and then I added skill set and support, right? That the whole idea that the psychedelic experience is not just the session itself, but the experience is preparation, navigation and integration. Okay? ואנחנו נתחיל עכשיו לדבר על זה. אז רק תזכרו את זה שזה המודל שלנו. And what is psychedelic therapy? אז קודם כל, the word therapy is the idea of a treatment or disease or disorders by a remedial, rehabilitating or curative process, power or quality. ואני רק רוצה להדגיש את זה פה אני לא יודעת כמה זה נכון, אבל in the US, for example, you can't really use the term therapy unless you're a therapist. Okay?
Counseling.
גם counselors, עכשיו זה גם נהיה דבר חדש, counselors can give therapy, if you're not licensed, אסור לך לקרוא לך counselor גם זה כבר נהיה.
You're a coach, you say.
And that's, כן, הדבר האחרון שנשאר לנו זה להיות קואוצ'רים, אוקיי? If we're not licensed. אבל אני רוצה לדבר פה על הקטע של therapy in the context of, again, specifically the curative process, power or quality של החומרים עצמם, של החוויה עצמה. אז לא של המטפל בתור therapist, לא של הטיפול עצמו בתור therapist, אלא the process that the individual goes through as the inner healing mechanism through their own inner healer as the therapist. למעשה, למרות שמאוד מקובל עכשיו, obviously, בכל ה-clinical trials שיש עכשיו, שמה שהם עושים לנו למעשה, שהם מדגימים שחייב שיהיה therapist in the room כדי שהבן אדם יחלים והם יקבלו את כל התוצאות החיוביות האלה, אותי אישית זה נורא מכעיס. קודם כל אני מוקירה תודה שזה קיים ו-how wonderful that things are coming up. לתודעה שלנו ואנשים יותר נפתחים מזה כי הם באמת רואים את התוצאות. Unparalleled results with psychedelic healing ששום תרפי אחר לא יכול לתת לנו. אז נשים את זה שנייה בצד. מצד שני עכשיו מה הם עושים? הם לוקחים את כל הכוח של psychedelics and they're putting them in the hands of the therapist. אוקיי? אז מה הם עושים? איפה הכוח עצמו of the psychedelic experience to heal the person? Where is that intrinsic healing quality?
External. They're making it external.
Exactly. So they're shifting the power again to just a different group of people.
And also the power of the person to heal himself with the help of the psychedelic. Also.
Exactly. And they're stripping the individual from their, basically they're saying, well, you're not a therapist, you can't heal yourself. זה מרתיח אותי, זה מקומם אותי. אני חושבת, I think, כל כולי ממוקדת בלתמוך באנשים, מה שנקרא by the people for the people, אוקיי? הארגון שהכרתי בארצות הברית, שנקרא פסיכדליה, it's specifically peer support. זה לא therapist שבאים לעשות integration לאף אחד, זה peer-to-peer model, אנשים שבגובה העיניים שגם עוברים בעצמם את החוויות האלה ומהלב שלהם הם יכולים לתמוך באנשים אחרים. Not to say, אוקיי, אני גם רוצה להגיד את זה בהסתייגות, שהרבה מאוד אנשים, תלוי במצב שלהם, תלוי במטרות שלהם, כן צריכים אולי therapist לידם. יהיה מוטב שכן יהיה לידם therapist בתהליך הזה שילווה אותם, בין אם זה בסשן עצמו, בין אם זה ב-preparation and the integration phases before and after. Specifically if they have heavy trauma that they're dealing with, mental health disorders, family issues, and so forth. So psychedelics, first of all, they're not for everyone. זה מאוד תלוי בכל מיני פרימטרים ש we need to assess beforehand, which we'll get to in just a minute. אבל לא כולם חייבים therapist, ומה שכן כולם חייבים זה education. Okay? Then once you have the education in hand, then hopefully you can make an informed decision on how to proceed, whether you can proceed on your own, or maybe you do need a support system.
You need a facilitator or somebody to be with you.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Some people, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Not always, but...
למה?
Not always.
I can answer you why
I can do it by myself.
אתה שואל?
But if you want your ego to dissolve, you don't need to...
שנייה רגע, שנייה. אם אפשר שנייה, סליחה. כמו שאמרתי עכשיו, אם אתה עכשיו מה שאמרת, אם הבנתי אותך נכון, אמרת, יש אנשים שכן צריכים therapist.
מישהו.
אז נכון. אז זה מה שעכשיו אמרתי, שאני מסכימה איתך. אוקיי? יש כאלה שבאמת הם צריכים, ואני לא ממליצה בכלל שיעשו את זה לבד. תלוי עוד פעם, אם יש להם post-traumatic stress disorder, יש להם חוויות אקיוטיות של טראומה בחיים שהם יודעים עליהם וקיימים. ואגב, not everyone knows that they have trauma. In fact, most of us are walking around with tons of trauma and have no idea. Okay? That trauma is actually harder to heal than no trauma. אבל יש אנשים באמת שתלוי ב-level of experience שלהם, תלוי בכל מיני פרימטרים, שלא חייב שיהיה להם facilitator, אבל מה שהם צריכים זה את ה-education, את הכלים. אז למה? כי עוד פעם, ה-power is not in the hands of the therapist, necessarily. אז אני רק רוצה לעשות את ההדגשה הזאת ואת ההבדלה. וכמובן, what's your intention? Is it recreational or for spiritual healing? שגם על זה דיברנו אתמול, שזה מאוד משנה. הנה הפרוטוקול שלי פה, הפורמילה שלי ל-psychedelic therapy. איך psychedelic therapy נראה. אני בעצמי עשיתי את הטריינינג של MAPS, עשיתי כמה מודולס שלהם. לא סיימתי אותו, אבל עשיתי כמה מהמודולס של התוכנית שלהם, של ה-MDMA Assisted Psychotherapy. והם, הרי המודל של MAPS, איך הוא עובד, בדרך כלל, עושים 1 month of preparation, מפגשים שבועיים, בהם ה-participant נפגש עם ה-therapist שלו, מדברים על מכירים, basically to work on the rapport, to build the trust, talk about the, to get background on the trauma that they hope to resolve. ואז בתום חודש עושים את הטריטמנט הראשון. אחרי זה עוברים לחלק שני, שעושים post integration of the first treatment and preparing for the next one. And then another month of that, of these 4 sessions, and then you go into a second treatment, and then another month of talk therapy, and then a third treatment. ואז יש להם אחרי זה, after the third journey אצל MAPS יש להם עוד 3 מפגשים אני חושבת, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, וזהו, כאן נגמר להם, שם תם ונשלמה החוויה שלהם, של ה-MDMA Assisted Psychotherapy Protocol.
But it's the protocol for post-trauma disorder, no?
אני מדברת עכשיו על MAPS, נכון, שמדברת על פוסט-טראומה, אוקיי? נתתי דוגמה של משהו שקיים בשוק. עכשיו, אני באופן אישי מכירה בקהילה אצלנו בארצות הברית כמה אנשים שעברו את ה-MAPS פרוטוקול הזה, חלקם בהצלחה רבה. Change their lives. They say, אחד הדברים הראשונים שיוצאים להם מהפה, אני לא הייתי בחיים אם לא הייתי עובר את החוויה הזאת. They're very grateful for it. הביקורת העיקרית שיש להם עבור את ה-MAPS, they don't have integration, אין להם follow-up, אף אחד לא בודק מה איתם, הם פשוט נזרקים למים לחיים ולא יודעים מה לעשות עם עצמם. אז מתוקף היותי בן אדם שהוא integration focused, והלקוחות שלי שגם עוברים בנפרד ב-underground את ה-treatments שלהם, what I find to be very beneficial and very helpful is first of all to set a 6-month time frame for the healing journey. מה זה אומר? בן אדם שנגיד מגיע אליכם, אני לא יודעת אם יש כאן מטפלים או לא, בואו נגיד שלא, אבל אם כן, בן אדם שמגיע אליכם אומר, אני רוצה לרפא את העניין הזה בחיי, או just, I'm feeling stuck in my life, I want to break through, I want to give this a try. מה בדרך כלל מטפלים מציעים? אוקיי, תתחיל עם טיפול אחד ואז נראה מה יהיה. זה אפשרי, אין בעיה. אני חושבת שמה שמראה יותר תוצאות בשטח, זה לדבר לא על העניין של כמה טיפולים, אלא time period in your life. Why? Because as we saw in the life pie, זה לוקח כל כך הרבה זמן וכל כך הרבה אנרגיה מכל every aspect of our lives, that you really want to get the person's attention for their healing, וממש להגיד להם, אתה רוצה להבריא ולהחלים, אין בעיה. Dedicate the 6 months in your life, right now, and set intentions for short term, long term, איפה אתה רוצה להיות עוד חצי שנה? כי זה באמת לוקח זמן, not just to get the psychedelic insights, but also to get the wheels rolling and setting into motion, that the person needs time to change their habits and adjust to their lives. אז שמגדירים להם את ה-6 months הזה, אז קודם כל, אז הם כבר שולחים מסאג' לסייקי, okay, I have time, number 1. Sending a message that they're expecting the psyche to also, basically they're making an internal unconscious alliance with their psyche, והסייקי עובד יותר משתף פעולה, ועוד יותר, הם מצליחים לצלול יותר עמוק, להביא יותר חומר, הם יותר מחויבים לפרוסס. בקיצור, לא עושים רק אחד ונזרקים למים ואז מה, מחויבים לזה. והמחויבות הזאת עושה הבדל עצום בטרנספורמיישן של הבן אדם. ואם תראו פה שהוספתי אחרי ה-journey 2 to 3 months of integration plus maintenance, אז באמת זה לא נגמר אחרי 4 מפגשים. אחרי 4 מפגשים הבן אדם עדיין, don't forget that after the psychedelic journey יש שבועיים, 3-4, they're kind of semi-high. Okay? הם עדיין לא לגמרי מקורקעים, המוח עדיין לא הגיע, לא חזר להיות לגמרי ניטרלי, אוקיי? אז לוקח זמן גם פיזית עד שהבן אדם חוזר לקרקע, ורק אחרי שהוא חוזר, או הם או היא, חוזרים לקרקע לגמרי, רק אז אפשר להתחיל לדבר על אוקיי, תכלס, איזה שינויים אתה מתחיל לעשות פה, ואיך אתה מתחיל להזיז את עצמך קדימה, וגם לראות באמת שזה עובד, again, setting habits and it takes time. אז החצי שנה הזה זה עובד כמו קסם. ו-most people, אגב כתבתי על זה כתבה קצרה באתר שלי, מי שרוצה לקרוא על זה יותר, ממש כתבתי, what each journey seems to have a very specific kind of תפקיד.
Yeah, I think there is a link in the event.
כן, כן, כתבתי על זה. יש ממש תפקיד מסוים של כל אחד מה-journeys האלה בתוך המעגל של המעגל הקסם הזה של ה3. כן.
Do you use only MDMA or different substance for different patients?
זה בפרוטוקול, זה תלוי מאוד מה הבן אדם רוצה לפתור, עם מה הם מגיעים לשולחן, מה level הניסיון שלהם, כמה הם מחויבים לפרוסס, כמה המוכנות הנפשית שלהם, כמה פניות יש להם לזה. לא לכולם יש פניות, הרבה אנשים רוצים, אבל אין להם את הפניות הזמן בחיים לעשות את זה.
It's also financial.
No, I'm asking about the substance itself. What substance do you use?
Yeah, so, אז אני אומרת, זה מאוד תלוי. יש MDMA, יש פסילוסיבין, יש קדמין.
How is that related to putting the time in their lives?
אני לא מבינה את השאלה. תסבירי.
אני לא הבנתי את התשובה.
כן.
כי אם ענית לי על כמה זמן יש להם, כמה פניות יש להם, זה קשור לחומר. זה קשור למוכנות לתת לזה 6 חודשים.
זה קשור לחומר בגלל ש-every substance is going to get other different things out of you. אוקיי? וייתן לך different depth of level of the experience. ויש אנשים גם, את יודעת, יש אנשים שרוצים לקבוע מראש איך ומה זה יראה. ואני אומרת, זה לא נכון, כי יכול להיות שתעשה one journey, usually the journey looks exactly the opposite of what you think it's going to look like. אז צריך ממש לחשוב ברגע האמת מה מתאים לפעם הבאה, ממש לעשות מין road mapping כזה, אוקיי? לנווט.
השאלה, האם הפרוטוקול נשאר זהה מבחינת הזמנים בכל סוג סאבסטנס? מבינה את השאלה?
כן. זאת שאלה אחרת, אוקיי. זאת השאלה שהתכוונת? אוקיי, אז תודה. אז אני יכולה להגיד לך, אני ממליצה לפרוטוקול הזה, אבל בשטח לא כולם מוכנים אחרי חודש להמשיך קדימה.
זאת אומרת, את ממליצה לפרוטוקול, לא חשוב באיזה סאבסטנס משתמשים, זאת השאלה שלי.
כן, אני ממליצה לפרוטוקול הזה, לא חשוב באיזה סאבסטנס משתמשים. החודש הזה באמת נותן את הזמן, אבל בהסתייגות, כי יש אנשים שגם אחרי חודש לא מרגישים עדיין מוכנים. ואז יש אנשים
גמישות, כן.
לגמרי גמישות.
זה גם בהסתייגות מחומרים מסוימים. אנחנו מדברים על גוף או על בוגה לדוגמה,
ברור, כן. לא, that's why specifically I said MDMA, psilocybin, LSD. כן.
זה קצת מתנגש עם ההמלצה במרכאות לעשות MDMA במרווחים של חודשיים. אז נשאלת השאלה, כי אומרים שכשעושים MDMA מעל פעם בחודשיים זה כבר מתחיל להזיק לגוף ולמוח. נשאלת השאלה, האם תחת טיפול יש איזה סוג של forgiveness, אני לא יודע איך לתאר את זה?
אני מכירה את ההמלצה הזאת, אני לא בהכרח מסכימה איתה, גם מאפסה גם לא מסכימים איתה, כי הם עושים את הטיפול כל חודש.
אז ההמלצה הזאת היא בגדר לחבר'ה שהולכים למסיבות כאילו? זה מעניין אותי כאילו
איך ולמה? אז אם מבחינה רפואית, בן יכול כנראה להסביר את זה, אבל אני יודעת, they're asking sweetheart why, or what, how does this protocol, or the MAPS protocol, that recommend follow a protocol of doing MDMA once a month and not every other month according to other recommendations, how does that work?
Why they space it a month instead of every 2 months?
Mm-hmm.
Well, probably they're trying to do a clinical trial, right? And when you do a clinical trial, they're doing a week of psychotherapy in between. So if they did MDMA session every other month, they would have twice as many psychotherapy sessions, which might equate to how many more millions of dollars to run that study, right? So it seems that it takes about 2 weeks after an MDMA experience for your serotonin to return to the baseline level.
2 weeks, not 2 weeks?
No, about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. So it seems
the
that,
recommendation
I
is
mean,
to wait
most
2
of the
months.
people that are using MDMA here are psychedelic naive or have not taken MDMA before, right? So if you're somebody that's sort of like, I like MDMA, I want to take it long term. Yeah, I probably would recommend more than every other month or quarterly, like 3-4 times a year. That seems sustainable for the long run.
Okay, so this is for freshmen.
Doing it every single month for a decade, yeah, you're going to probably run into problems after a year or two, right? Whereas this, it sort of seems like, okay, someone with PTSD that doesn't have much, or maybe they had one ecstasy experience a long time ago or something, you know, a month should be plenty for them. But yeah, you're kind of thinking about someone that's a heavier user or you're trying to recreationally use, I wouldn't recommend more than quarterly, really, if you're trying to do it over and over year after year.
And also I would like to add that most people don't necessarily do MDMA 3 times. They might actually choose to do psilocybin instead. ואז בכלל, זה לא...
להתחיל כאילו עם MDMA ואז בג'רני השנים יגידו אני רוצה לנסות...
כן.
וואלה.
כן. I'm talking about, yeah, a psychedelic healing model, not necessarily just with one substance, and even doing combinations, like MDMA and psilocybin in one journey.
Are there any running trials for MDMA?
No.
It's all underground.
Yes.
And some of the medicines are good for therapy because of the shortness, like psilocybin and MDMA. Well, it's 4 hours. Well, if I take mescaline, it can be much longer. Just not suitable, but in healthy wise.
Well, again, I think it depends on, obviously, on the availability, המוכנות, הפניות, הזמן, on the therapist, on המשאבים, זה תלוי בכל מיני דברים. נכון?
So is this why you sort of didn't go forward with the maps?
No, I had different reasons for that. But if I have criticism, I mean, I have some criticism for their program, right? I mean, their professionals are doing a great job. A lot of our friends are actually therapists on the trials. But again, being an integration person and seeing the results that people get with proper integration, their life absolutely transformed and they're feeling great. They're able to really carry on the change and not go back to being depressed after a few months.
Well, formally, the people in MAPS, the therapists themselves, can't take MDMA, and maybe never took MDMA.
Yes, that is true. Some of them I've met, they've never taken MDMA, which I think is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous, but let's not get into that.
So you can say it's like the minimum model kind of thing. What you suggested is like the minimum model.
The minimum model? That's my personal opinion. Yeah. Okay, we're going to skip. זה דברים שהם יותר תאוריה. This slide I want to look at, okay? Probably one of my favorite slides. שאנשים אומרים לי, okay, so what do you do? What do I have to do as a psychedelic support person? Do you just talk to people about their experience? Do you just kind of, sit with them and have a conversation with them? תכלס, מה את עושה בתור integration professional? בבקשה. שאנשים באים אליי קודם כל, and a lot of people are, by the way, contrary to the popular belief, that you would think that really experienced people come to, reach out to professionals. Most of my clients are actually people that have either never experienced psychedelics before or have done it a long time ago, and they want to approach it right this time. So the first thing that we do first and foremost is a psychedelic safety assessment, which has a long list of questions. And first of all, we see if they're good candidates for psychedelic therapy. We work on clarifying intentions, what their desires are, and what kind of relationships they have with substances, their level of education. We go over preparation protocols to help them prepare for the session better and condition them for the upcoming change in their lives. I teach them a navigation skill set. I teach them integration interventions, both for immediately after the journeys and also long-term things that they can use well after our 6 months together are over. I help them or teach them how to translate their symbols and the meaning, basically make meaning out of their ineffable experience and see how it relates to their lives, maybe it doesn't at all, how to sift through the insights, how to discern from which insights they actually want to utilize, because not every insight that you see needs to be made manifest, okay? Some of them you really have to sit with and allow them to mature with you before you act on them, if at all. Obviously, trauma processing, and again, the trauma that a lot of people come to the table not even knowing they have trauma, and actually that's the hardest trauma to really heal, is that the ones that we're people are unaware of. Offering emotional support through challenges and crises, because one of the most fascinating stages in the integration process is actually that of disintegration. ב6 חודשים האלה יש תקופה שהבן אדם מתפרק לגמרי לחתיכות. כל החיים שלהם פתאום לא נראים להם אותו דבר. הם לא יודעים מי הם, לא יודעים מה הם רוצים, לא יודעים לאן הם הולכים. תקופה מאוד מבלבלת, כרוכה בקצת סבל לפעמים. As my role is to support them through that and to remind them that they want to go through. Their snow globe was shaken. זה האנטרופי, okay? זה הכאוס. ועכשיו יש להם הזדמנות לסדר את הכאוס בדרך חדשה that's more aligned with the results they want to achieve. Goal setting, of course, we work on a very specific goal setting and action plan, אנחנו ממש מודדים and measure their process towards their goals during the 6 months, and it's amazing. לפעמים כשאנשים נמצאים בתוך הפרוסס הם לא רואים כמה דרך הם עוברים, ואז אנחנו עושים שנייה סטופ ועוברים על כל ה-goals שהם, they set for themselves in the beginning of the 6 months, והם פשוט בשוק כמה הם התקדמו. לא בהכרח השיגו את כל ה-goals באמצע הדרך, אבל לגמרי רואים התקדמות בחיים, וזה נותן המון מוטיבציה. Applying, ממש, to keep them accountable as they apply their new insights, I give them a lot of homework. הם מקבלים ממני ספרים של, חוץ מה-resources, articles, books, podcasts, events, meditations. לי אישית בתוכנית שלי, ואגב, אני רק רוצה להגיד ש integration is not really taught anywhere. אין על זה theory בשום מקום. אין על זה psychology model. זה בדיוק מה שאני מנסה לעשות. כל הדברים האלה זה דברים שאני, מכורח המציאות, זה מה שיוצא לי ללמוד עם לקוחות, זה מה שאני רואה שהלקוחות בשטח עושים, אז המצאתי תוכנית כזאת של אינטגרציה, וחלק מהתוכנית שלי היא, אני כותבת לאנשים אחרי כל שיעור, יושבת וכותבת להם personalized article on a specific topic that came up out of our session. For example, if something came up about boundaries, גבולות, אני כותבת להם article שלהם על גבולות, כותבת להם על זה שיעורי בית, more articles for further learning and a challenge for the week. ואז יש להם עבודת שיעורי בית. האינטגרציה לא נגמרת אחרי שאנחנו מסיימים את השעה שלנו ביחד, הם הולכים הביתה וממשיכים את האינטגרציה כל יום. אוקיי? ואגב, זה מאוד תלוי ב-professional, how deep you want to go with them and also how deep they are and how deep they want to go. How deep your medicine is. אוקיי? שלנו בתור professionals, we bring in our own medicine to the table and we pour from our medicine to our client. הם שותים מהקופ שלנו. אז obviously, כל מטופל, מטפל, יש את ה-relationship שלו, לא כל מטופל מתאים לכל מטפל, and vice versa, אבל אנשים שמגיעים אליי, אני שמה את הכל על השולחן, מתאים סבבה, this is what I offer, and I expect you to show up. ואם לא, אין בעיה, לך למישהו אחר שרק נותן לך את ה-60 דקות והסתיימה דרככם. אוקיי? This is what I believe in. The transpersonal container, obviously, אין דיבור על אינטגרציה בלי transpersonal psychology, Carl Jung, and Stan Grof specifically, and maybe most importantly, זה ממש בית מקדש שקיים בינינו, שהם יודעים שהם יכולים לבוא אליי without judgment, without criticism, without looking at them like they're crazy, כי הרבה מהאנשים האלה אין להם עם מי לדבר, even their partner sometimes doesn't. אגב, by the way, when the partner doesn't know that they're about to do this, אני בכלל לא ממליצה לעשות. לא מתאים. חייב שיהיה complete transparency, אבל כאילו מישהו מקבל אותם, זה באמת הדבר הכי חשוב בתרפי, as you guys know, that relationship. אז זה professional support system שלי.
מה זה navigation skills?
זה אנחנו תכף נדבר עליו, זה הסקיל סט שעוזר לבן אדם לנווט the psychedelic session, which we're going to talk about today.
אני חייב להגיד שזה קצת מתנגש לי עם מה שאמרת קודם, של לתת לבן אדם, לבת אדם, לסאבטנס, לעבוד ביחד באיזשהו תיווך מבחוץ, באיזושהי הנחיה, כי זה קצת הופך פיגמליון, אני מרגיש.
פיגמליון? לא מבינה.
פיגמליון, what the Greek
נבואה שמגשימה.
נבואה שמגשימה.
שמה?
אם את מנחה מישהו לעשות משהו, אז רוב הסיכויים שהוא יעבור את הדבר הזה, יכול להיות שהוא היה צריך לעבור משהו אחר אולי. זה כאילו קצת לוקח את...
I think I get what you're saying.
זה כוח לשמן, ולא, זה קצת כאילו...
I think I get what you're saying. השיטה שלי היא מאוד כרוכה בלתת לבן אדם את הכלים. אוקיי? שאני נגיד עובדת איתם על meaning attribution, I don't give them the fish, I teach them how to fish. אני מלמדת אותם איך לעשות את זה. That's why I give them resources. ואני תמיד אומרת להם, you know, when you come here, it's like a buffet. אני נותנת לך tons of resources, tons of opportunities. You eat what you want, you don't eat what you don't want. ובדרך כלל you can't eat everything בגלל שתקבל כאב בטן מרוב שיש הרבה דברים. והבן אדם בוחר את האופציות שלו ואת הדרך שלו בין השפע שאני מציעה. כמו שאמרתי לך אתמול בערב, I don't think that having an integration professional is necessary, כמו שאני לא חושבת that a therapist is necessary, תלוי עוד פעם במי ומה, בגולס, בטראומה, etc. אני יכולה להגיד שלי באופן אישי, שאני עברתי ועדיין עוברת, ולא ייגמר התהליך אינטגרציה שלי, having my Jungian psychologist, analyst, and an integration coach שהתמכו בי, גרם לי לעבור את הדרך בצורה הרבה יותר חלקה, הרבה יותר מהירה והרבה יותר עמוקה. Because I had that support. But if people who don't want the professional support, they can definitely, again, go to peer support. They can find ways of supporting themselves. Some type of a support system. לא להיות לבד, להיזרק למים, בלי שום מטרה, בלי שום כיוון.
עכשיו אני מרגיש שאם אני רוצה לעשות את זה בלי support, אז זה לא יהיה מספיק עמוק, זה לא...
But you can decide what support level is right for you. זה מה שאני מנסה להגיד. לכל אחד, and you know, for some people, their support system is the educational support system, כמו מה שאני מלמדת עכשיו, או מה שאני מלמדת ב-online course. They have the information, and then they can decide what's best for them. אבל בעיניי, לגשת לזה בלי ידע, ידע זה סוג של support, אז אולי באמת זה תלוי, אולי זה עניין של tomatoes.
כן. כן, זה גם, כשאתה הולך למטפל, אתה לא יודע שהוא יעזור לך, אתה מנסה.
כן, אז עוד פעם, זה תלוי, ולא, יש different professionals, יש כל מיני אפשרויות לספורט.
זה תהיה עם עצמי, איפה עובר, כמו פור כזה, איפה אני באמת הולך לזה נקי לגמרי ונותן לחוויה להגיע ממקום שהוא בלי דעות קדומות, בלי...
לגמרי.
זה לא שאינטגרטורים ומטפלים זה דבר רע, אבל יש להם גם איזושהי, מנחים אותך לאיזשהו כיוון.
It's structure, ברור. structure תנחה אותך, ומה שהרבה אנשים מחפשים למעשה בתחום המאוד אמורפי הזה, והפרוץ הזה זה structure. ולהרבה אנשים, ברגע שיש להם את ה-structure, זה ממש מוריד להם אבן מהלב, וזה באמת the support they need. הם לא בהכרח ממשיכים איתי לעבוד הרבה זמן גם, הם מקבלים את הכלים וממשיכים הלאה. אז כל אחד בוחר מה שנוח לו, אבל יש אופציות.
אתה שם בטיפול,
זה
מולה משהו שאתה מפחד
נראה לי לא לוקחים הפסקות.
אתה מפחד שמישהו משפיע עליך, אתה שם לגמרי.
חברים, one more question.
What about like a first aid support or integration for someone who's having either like an entropy experience or even a psychotic experience, that not in a therapeutic encounter, but more in like the underground or
כן, אני לא זוכרת אם יש לי איזה סלייד או לא, אבל שנגיע לאינטגריישן פייס אולי נדבר על זה, אם זה בסדר? כן, שלא נפריע פה לסדר, נראה לי שנסיים פה, סליחה, לא, זה משהו שמאוד חשוב, psychedelic safety assessment, אוקיי? אז איך אני עושה לבן אדם safety assessment? אגב, זה לא רק אני, זה גם, אם אין כאן מטפלים, this is an assessment you can do for yourself. קודם כל, מה הקטע של safety assessment? זה לדעת every person has the right and the privilege to make a choice for themselves, and the choice is going to be better when and it's informed choice. Informed choice and informed consent. שהבן אדם נותן לעצמו רשות או למטפל רשות לעשות את הבחירה הזאת, לזכור ש-psychedelics are not for everyone, כמה שכולנו היינו רוצים לשים לכולם כמו טימותי לירי את ה-LSD במים, psychedelics are not for everyone. יש המון אנשים ש-psychedelics can do more harm than good to them. אז לעשות את ה-safety assessment הזה זה מאוד עוזר, כמובן, to discern between who could be a good candidate and who's not. Safety is a top priority, number one. כל הקטע ב-psychedelics זה that they're meant to help us. They're meant to support us. If they're not supporting us and not helping us, אז הם לא שווים שום דבר. אוקיי? עם כל maybe idealizations שאנחנו עושים לתחום הזה, בואו נזכור את זה, חברים, שזה psychedelics they're a tool to help our human experience, but they're not, הם לא המטרה, אוקיי? They're a tool. וגם, when you do these questions, שכוללים את הדברים האלה פה, זה, when you do these questions, when you answer the questions, basically, אם בן אדם אומר כן או לא, זה לא בהכרח אומר שהוא לא מתאים, but it can just give a person a better understanding on what areas in their lives they need to keep working on so they can get themselves to a level where they are good candidates, okay? As it is also a tool. As some examples, לחלוטין לא כל ה-questionnaire, but some examples of some questions. In the physical, למשל, are you pregnant? Are you nursing? יש לך איזה acute medical condition, any cardiovascular issues, any high blood pressure, any recent surgery, what type of, are you taking any pharmaceuticals? כמה זמן אתה לוקח לפרמסוטיקלס? Psychological questions can be, have you ever been hospitalized for mental health disorders? Have you ever been diagnosed for mental health disorders? Are you experiencing depression? To what degree? Anxiety? To what degree? כל השאלות הפסיכולוגיות. Ever had any trauma? Any have suicidal thoughts? And also, what's the level of stress in your life? Okay. Substance use and addiction. Do you use alcohol, cigarettes, coffee? Okay. אם כן, כמה? למה? ממש לרדת לשורש הבעיה שכמובן הם מודעים אליה. Any other drugs? What's your relationship to cannabis? Any other addictive behaviors like food, like porn, like social media? כל זה נתן לנו ממש תמונה של ה-behavioral structure של הבן אדם. Lifestyle, are you seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist for any reason? If so, for how long? Who's your support system right now? הבן זוג שלכם יודע שאתם פה? לא שזה דבר רק מובן, אבל do you have the support of your partner? Are you going through a life transition? Can you even talk to your therapist about this, right? ואגב, what's the level of knowledge of your therapist? Are they psychedelic friendly? Psychedelic knowledgeable? Or psychedelic experienced? יש הבדלים מאוד גדולים בין השלושה.
Or anti-psychedelics.
Pardon?
Also a genre, anti-psychedelics.
או בכלל, כן. כן, בדיוק. אז באמת מה ה-level שלהם, והאם הם, בקיצור, are they a good support system for you, או שיש צורך לשנות את זה או להוסיף את זה? Life situation, are you in a crisis? Remember, אם יש crisis or life change, it's not a good time right now, אז אולי נחכות עד שזה יעבור. How much time do you have to invest in your healing? Okay, אני תמיד מדגישה, זה יכול לקחת יותר אנרגיה ממה שאתם חושבים, אז תתכוננו לזה שזה ממש יכול להפוך לך את החיים. What do you think about life transformation? אתה פתוח לזה are you open to it? The most importantly, probably, is why do you want to try psychedelics? שאלה שהיא מאוד פשוטה, אבל גם אומרת הכל, אוקיי? אז שוב, אלו מגוון שאלות.
יש לך שאלון שאת יכולה to share?
יש לי, אני צריך לעבוד על הקובץ ולשלוח לכם, אבל כן, אני באה.
תודה.
כן.
תודה רבה.
כן, אין בעיה. כן, תזכירי לי. אני אשמח, בטח. כן. מישהו שיזכיר לי? בקיצור, ה-safety assessment.
אפשר שאלה קטנה על האספקט הפיזיולוגי. מנעד הפיזיולוגיה שלנו הוא מאוד מאוד גדול. מחלות, עניינים, איפה שם שמים את הגבול, כאילו זה מתאים לך, זה לא מתאים לך?
There are specifically acute medical conditions שלא מתאימים לסמים מסוימים. למשל, people with cardiovascular issues are not good candidates for MDMA. Okay?
לפעמים אתה לא יודע שיש לך cardiovascular.
Your father has
אז שואלים, אבל אם הבן אדם לא יודע, אז אתה יודע, גם אתה יכול להגיד לו, okay, depends on your age, are you taking any medications? האם אתה מרגיש איזשהו עניין? אם כן, אז אולי באמת go get it checked, אבל...
למשל, באחד מהירחונים של הפסיכונה, קראתי למשל המלצה שטיפול בפטריות, לעשות פטריות עם מסע משמעותית, צריך כבד חזק.
There are, well, liver conditions, גם זה גם contraindication.
לא כבד חזק.
Yeah, Ben has a section coming up about this.